This video is for a flipped classroom to be done by September 30th in preparation for class. We are looking at 10.3.2 Teddy Roosevelt and Big Stick Diplomacy. What you should do while watching this video is use those notes I printed out for you last class, and I want you to annotate, make meaning out of them, and add more examples and explanations and connections so you truly understand this. And just so you know, I'm splitting this up into two different videos. This part is about Teddy Roosevelt as president, and the next part will be about the actual foreign policy, because you have to understand Teddy in order to understand his decisions, just like you would with any president. A lot of what I will be talking about right now would be very good to add to your interactive notebook for Think Fast when we're looking to characterize Teddy Roosevelt. So we are on bullet 3, progressive presidents and foreign policies. So even though Teddy did a lot domestically under the square deal, he is going to, we need to focus on foreign policies as that's what the bullet asks for. We are also on topic 10, remembering that we're focusing on how this emerges the United States as a power, how they are going to modernize, and unlike in previous bullets where we were pretty much just looking at industry and the modernization of it, we're going to look at the modernization of other aspects of our government, how we use foreign policy to emerge, and what we do in Latin America and how that emerges us as a power. So we're on bullet 3, the impact of their foreign policies, really breaking it down into aims, tactics, and outcomes. So when you're filling out your master topic and bullet after watching this, what I suggest you do is for Big Stick, what were Teddy's aims for Big Stick? What were Teddy's tactics for Big Stick? And what were Teddy's outcomes for Big Stick? And really clarifying that and having that visual representation for you. So we are on 10.3.2 Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm also including 10.3.1 because the historical context that we set last class is important in understanding Teddy as president. Your key question: compare and contrast Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy to his predecessors. He will greatly change the presidency, greatly change the course of the United States. And how does he do that? How does he do things differently? What are his aims? How are they different? What are his tactics, his outcomes, and looking at the similarities and differences of that. The 20th century is known as America century, and Teddy is the president at the beginning of this century and makes a lot of decision making that is going to greatly impact that. In his 7 years as president, historians say he did more than many other presidents combined. He has had a great impact in setting precedents and being a turning point for the United States. So this video will look at Teddy Roosevelt. We're going to look at him as a human and as a president. The next video, we're actually going to see it play out with Big Stick, Roosevelt Corollary, and Panama Canal. Focusing on the key concept of change, because Teddy really does change the presidency and change the United States. Remembering that change under IB, we're looking at who is causing change, what is causing change, what is the short-term change that occurs, what's the long-term change. Are we challenging the change narrative? Was there actually change, or was it really just continuity? So this is Teddy. Teddy is known for his youthful exuberance. He is the youngest president to ever enter office, and his personality really encompasses that. He is very active. He's known as an action man. He doesn't just say he's gonna do something, he does it. He's also known as a dynamo of energy, kind of overwhelming, very gregarious, very social. And a lot of people will say that this perfectly mirrors where the United States was at this time. We are a young nation, but we're ready to burst onto the world stage. We have just proven our success as a great power through the Spanish-American, Cuban-Filipino War. We've overcome the most divisive time of our history in the Civil War and come out on the other side of it. We're looking forward to optimism and growing as a power. And so Teddy perfectly encompasses that and will be a quintessential person to take the United States on that journey. But just remember, like we talked about last class, even though the United States is ready to burst out onto the scene, we're picturing that political cartoon with the eagle trying to burst out of the doors. People within the United States are trying to keep it shut because they would rather have national security than that internationalization that Teddy wants. He's known as a steam engine in trousers, that he's very powerful. He's very present, very action-based, and this is going to show up in the presidency. He is going to make the president the center of American politics because of the way of his energy and his action. Now, this is what we are used to. We're used to the president being the center of politics. But prior to Teddy, presidents were pretty laid back. Many presidents saw the presidency as a burden, and they really didn't even enjoy it. Teddy, on the other hand, really loves being president. Like, he loves it. He's obsessed with it, unabashedly loves being president, thinks it's the greatest thing. And so he will be greatly different, and he's going to cause that change and set the precedent for the modern presidency, that the president's the center of our politics and the decision making. Prior to this, our presidents, based on the origins of our country and how we didn't want a tyrant to rise, were pretty laid back and not very proactive, and waited to step in to when they needed to, pretty much letting Congress do a majority of the ruling. And that's many of the presidents during the Gilded Age. Teddy's going to come in and be very different. What he pretty much says is, if it's not prohibited by law, it's under my authority. And so he's going to expand the role of the president and really make it what we know it as today. He is just this very gregarious, active guy. He needs to be the center of attention. And this can be seen in how he views what happened in Cuba during the Spanish-American-Cuban War. When he was fighting as a Rough Rider, he kind of says he was alone in Cuba. And if you think about it, someone in this position does have to have that kind of ego. He's also going to be the very first president to monopolize the media and use it to his advantage. Thinking about historical context and looking back at Bullet 2, we had yellow journalism, sensationalism. We had this playing up, and Teddy uses it to his advantage. He uses it to his advantage specifically on his domestic front with his square deal, where he wants to bust up the trust. And he uses the media to expose the corruption that is happening in factories. He's also going to eventually use it later on during Woodrow Wilson's presidency, because he goes to Woodrow Wilson once we've declared war and he says, hey, let me head up expeditionary forces like I did with the Rough Riders. And Wilson says, no. And so Teddy's like, wow, you clearly don't have the country's best interests in mind, because I would be a really good choice for this. And so he uses the media to call out Wilson and say that he's not doing a good job and that he's being a very weak president. He will be the first president to reach celebrity status. What that means is he's not just known for being president and his presidential decision making, but people know who he is. People want to know more about him, know more about him and his family, know about what he's doing. Even after he leaves the presidency, he goes on a year-long safari in Africa, and people want to know what's going on with that. So this is Teddy. Teddy's a very out there kind of guy, action-based, in your face. And so what does he do as president? Well, McKinley gets assassinated in September of 1901, and he takes over. In one of his first addresses to Congress, he says, whether we desire it or not, we must henceforth recognize that we have international duties, no less than international rights. What he's saying here is, it's our obligation to assert ourselves as a power and to be involved and to be more active on a foreign policy level. And this is going to set the trend for Teddy's presidency and also set the trend for presidents to come. Like I said, historians say that he did more in his 7 years of presidency than many other presidents did in their whole time as president. So a big part of it is he exemplifies progressivism. Progressivism rises out of the Gilded Age about expanding the role of the government to protect people, not being in the pockets of corporations. And so he is going to really exemplify this through his domestic policy, which is called the Square Deal, where he's busting trusts, implementing lots of different departments like Commerce and Labor, Food and Drug Administration, protecting our national parks and building them up. So this is Teddy on the domestic front. And he'll combine this with how he expands the executive branch and really makes the president the center of American politics. and he will be the first modern president, meaning that he's the first president to really be active and to be making decisions and involved in everything. And this is very much so just who he is as a person. He was police commissioner in New York, and he was always on the ground actually investigating things, even though his job was to oversee. When he was governor of New York, and he was actually on the ground in the factories, being very active and integral to decision making. He also builds upon the precedents of McKinley in what will later be called the imperial presidency. And on a foreign policy level, remember his whole ideals in the 1890s, along with John Hay, who was his Secretary of State, he is a huge proponent of the large policy and growing the United States power, growing our involvement in our markets and our relations with other countries. And now, like I said last class, we're a great power, but we're not a major great power. And some evidence of this is that the other great powers had about 140 colonies and protectorates that took up 2/3 of the Earth's geographical surface and 1/3 of the population. So Teddy's aware we're a great power, but we're not that major power yet. And he wants to push us to that major power. And some tactics of how he's going to do that are by modernizing the instruments of a national power. So we're talking about modernization not in terms of industry and factories, but in terms of our military and our diplomatic corps. He's going to build up our military and go against and build from what we had with the irregular militia, but instead fund it more, have colleges for it, centralize it, really make it integral to our foreign policy, because you can't have a foreign policy unless you have a military threat to back it up. Otherwise, people will see right through what you're trying to push forward. So he really believes in Captain Mahan's influence of sea power and wants to expand the Navy. And so that's where he focuses on. And he puts emphasis into the Navy. And by 1910, we are the third largest Navy. Second, we're in third, Germany's in second, Britain's in first. And so we are growing, and he is growing that military. He says that even an adequate Navy is the cheapest and most effective peace insurance a nation can buy. So remember, the people at this time went to protect our national security. And their view of that is we need to be isolationists. Teddy says, no, we want to protect ourselves and have that security. We need to build up our military. We need to build up our Navy. Even just an adequate Navy will do the job, and we can be internationalists while protecting ourselves and guaranteeing that security. He's also going to up the ante with our diplomatic corps and really professionalize them, making sure that our diplomats and ambassadors are trained. They're passing examinations. That way they go out there and they represent the United States as a power and do not bow down to these other great powers. Here are some statistics of how our Navy is growing. By 1910, we have the third most. Britain is definitely large and in charge when it comes to the Navy. So Teddy, like I said, exemplifies progressivism, and this political cartoon really represents that he is aggressive and taking action, and he is progressing the role and really flexing his power as president and the government and breaking up those trusts. So that's on a domestic front. But when it comes to the foreign policy level, he really believes that we also have to progress our role beyond, because we need to civilize the backwards corners of the earth and benefit the foreigners. He really believes that we have this power. We are powerful, and we must use it for altruistic purposes, meaning we must use it for selfless purposes. And he will use this as justification for why he goes into so many different situations down in Latin America that you will see in the next video. He was also very well prepared for this job. Unlike many of his predecessors, McKinley was accused of not knowing anything about international affairs. Teddy was actually educated at Harvard, realizing that we must grow our trade in order to be a dominant power as a country. And in order to do that, we have to grow our industry. And he sees how we grow our industry as busting up the trust and really that progressivism. We also must grow our diplomacy. And so he is going to push for this. Now, here's the thing. He's a very polarizing president. Some people see him as being this great protector of us, of our rights, and very defending our honor as a new power. and other people say that he became a tyrant and overstepped his boundaries too far. And so this is when historiography comes into play. A lot of people will ask the question, was he out of control when he was out of power after he leaves the presidency? Was he really a progressive, or was he actually racist, sexist? Was he an imperialist? Was he an aristocrat, or really was he of the common man like he was purporting to the public?